Hello, I'm Esther Githu. It's Thursday, February 23rd. This is Africa 54. The exhumed remains of Burkina Faso's beloved ex-president Thomas Sankara are laid to rest Thursday in the capital, Ouagadougou. Nigeria's presidential hopefuls sign a peace pledge ahead of Saturday's presidential vote. VOA's Peter Clotty joins us live from Abuja. And U.S. Congress has appropriated more than $112 billion in aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion 1 year ago. All this and much more on today's Africa 54. Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara was reburied Thursday, 8 years after his body was exhumed as part of an investigation into his murder. Paul Ndiho has more.
The body of Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Thomas Sankara, and his 12 companions murdered on October 15, 1987, has been reburied at a spot where they were assassinated in a coup more than 3 decades ago, the country's junta announced on Thursday. Sankara's family did not attend the burial ceremony. Sankara came to power in August 1983 as an army captain, aged 33. Nicknamed Africa's Che Guevara, a charismatic Marxist-Leninist leader who blasted the West for neocolonialism and hypocrisy. He and Blaise Compaoré led a leftist coup that overthrew a moderate military faction. He changed the country's name from the colonial era Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, called the land of honest men, unquote, and pushed through various reforms including promoting vaccinations and banning of female genital mutilation. Supporters of Pan-Africanism and egalitarianism idolized Sankara, but his tenure was short-lived. A hit squad gunned him down and a dozen other leaders at a meeting of the ruling National Revolutionary Council in the capital, Ouagadougou. The exhumation came after the ousting of former strongman President Blaise Compaoré, who ruled the country for nearly 30 years and had blocked the exhumation. The killings occurred the same day Sankara's comrade-in-arms, Blaise Compaoré, seized power in 1987. He went on to rule for 27 years, during which Sankara's death was a strict taboo topic. In 2014, he was ousted by public protests. After Compaoré's downfall, Sankara's body and those of others were exhumed from a cemetery on the city's outskirts for an investigation. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. First Lady Jill Biden is in the southwestern African nation of Namibia on Thursday, where she started her 5-day trip to Africa. Her visit will focus on empowering women and youth and also highlight food insecurity in the Horn of Africa region. Her visit is part of a commitment by President Joe Biden to deepen U.S. engagement with the continent. From Namibia, the First Lady will be heading to the East African nation of Kenya. For more on Jill Biden's visit to Namibia, here is reporter Confidence Musasiri from Vidhak.
United States First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, on her first full visit to Namibia, has been embarking on different initiatives targeting the girl child, from health, education and youth empowerment. I took to the streets today in Windhoek to get a feeling of what the general populace thinks of her visit.
We welcome Dr. Joe Biden to Namibia. I hope that the Americans can start noticing our needs as young women in Africa.
And what the First Lady of the United States, what I can say is that she should maybe strengthen the commitment that the government should have towards the Namibian people, because they are mostly empty promises.
The First Lady of the United States has a very positive impact on the young Namibian girls, especially the ladies, the upcoming generation. It motivates us to become successful.
Well, I think that what would be very good is if we can get different types of investors or institutions that can actually partner up with institutions in this country, and we can come up with very amazing programs that can empower the girl child. As you've maybe realized, we also have a very high suicide rate in this country. So which again is a sign that we need better programs, we need better investors. We need, and I think that coming from the USA, where we have different types of programs for rehabilitation, where we have different types of programs for empowerment, for women emancipation and so on, I think if we can put our heads together and this type of programs can join with programs in Namibia, I think that it will be a very good thing.
It is Dr. Jill Biden's first trip to Africa as First Lady. She says her mission is to support women and youth across the continent. For Namibia, it is a breath of fresh air considering the high rates of gender-based violence, the high rates of lack of access to education for the girl child, as well as provision of access to health and other basic services.
First of all, I would start with the mental health of the youth. The youth's mental health really matters, and it's not taken into consideration. Teachers and parents don't really know what is actually going on with our mental health because we hide it. We don't talk about it because we don't have therapists. Not all of us can afford therapists because how expensive it is.
For me personally, I feel that the pads, we have to buy the pads as young ladies. I feel like talking to her, she would understand more because she's also a woman. I feel like in our country, Namibia, pads are for sale, and it's heartbreaking to actually buy pads.
For many, this could be a window of opportunity for change and attention to the many needs that women and youth are facing in the country, the many needs that the First Lady of Namibia, Ms. Monica Genkos, has been pushing for. Confidence Musariri, VOA, Windhoek, Namibia.
Turning to the upcoming Nigerian election, a senatorial candidate from the opposition Labour Party was killed late Wednesday night by unknown gunmen in the southeastern Enugu state. According to local party officials, Nigerians are scheduled to vote in a presidential and parliamentary election on Saturday. U.S. President Joe Biden called on Thursday for Nigeria's imminent presidential election to be peaceful and transparent. He urged the candidates and parties to accept the results as announced by the country's Electoral Commission. In Nigeria, presidential hopefuls signed a peace deal on Wednesday, promising to resolve grievances through the courts arising from what could be Nigeria's closest election in decades. David Doyle has more.
Candidates vying to be Nigeria's next president signed a peace pledge on Wednesday, amid fears that a close election result could trigger chaos and bloodshed.
His Excellency Gregory Peter Obi.
Saturday's vote could be the most credible and closest race since military rule ended in the country nearly a quarter of a century ago. Outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari said there should be no riots or acts of violence after the election results.
Let me remind all Nigerians, not for the first time, that this is the only country we have, and we must do everything to keep it safe, united, and peaceful.
Any grievances, Buhari said, should be settled through the relevant courts. There are 18 hopefuls competing for the top job, though just 3 are considered to be main candidates.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. And now we go to Nigeria for the latest update on the elections. I'm joined live by VOA's Peter Clot in Abuja. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Esther.
So, Peter, I gather tonight the campaigns are done with. It's over now. So who are the front runners and what were the candidates' final appeals to the electorate?
Well, Esther, if you tell any of the 17 or so candidates that they are not front runners, they take offense. However, official campaigning is scheduled to end at 11:59 p.m. That is a minute to midnight Friday here across the country in Nigeria. Now, the Friday is expected to be a reflection day for prospective voters to think about who to vote for in Saturday's election. Remember, Nigerians go to the polls on Saturday to choose a new president to replace outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari, a new Senate and a new House of Representatives. Expectations are high, and even some members of the youth I have spoken with say that they are ready to have a hand in who rules Nigeria in the next 4 years, Esther.
Peter, I'm curious. We just learned that a senatorial candidate was killed Wednesday by gunmen. Presidential candidates and other people running for various seats concerned about their security?
Well, the Deputy Inspector General of Police that we spoke with this morning said that they have deployed a lot of police officials across the country to ensure that prospective voters and the aspiring candidates are protected. Now, these are assurances, he said, the military, the other security agencies that are teaming up with the police force are giving to the people of Nigeria, that they will be protected, that the killing of the Labour Party senatorial candidate might be a one-off event. Don't forget that other party officials were also attacked during the same period, and some of the attacks were foiled. And the police in the region are saying they are up for the challenge. They will ensure that those who are bent on destroying Nigeria's faith in democracy are prosecuted and made to face the full force of the law. So these are some of the assurances the Nigerian police and other security agencies are telling the people of Nigeria ahead of the elections.
Peter, many thanks for your reporting. We'll connect tomorrow. Peter Claudy, VOA, they are reporting live for us from Abuja, Nigeria. The U.S. Congress has appropriated more than $112 billion in aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion 1 year ago. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson looks back at the scope of that assistance and reports on what happens next.
A promise from the Ukrainian president to the U.S. Congress last December.
Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way.
U.S. President Joe Biden pledged an additional $500 million in aid as he marked the one-year anniversary of the invasion, saying support for Ukraine would not waver.
All across my country, in big cities and small towns, Ukrainian flags fly from American homes. Over the past year, Democrats and Republicans in our United States Congress have come together to stand for freedom.
U.S. lawmakers' response in the first days of the invasion was swift, with overall broad support for assistance most say is key to American security.
The United States and our allies around the world quickly came to a consensus that we need to support Ukraine's defense of its people, territory, and way of life from Russian aggression.
Congress would ultimately send the largest aid package for a foreign conflict since the U.S. war in Iraq.
We had the situation where the administration was asking for not a trivial sum of money, and many people on the Hill, bipartisan, wanted them to go further and provide more offensive and powerful weapons to Ukraine. And so that's sort of unusual in American history. Typically, presidents are on the leading edge of these sorts of international conflicts.
But a year on, public support in the U.S. appears to be softening. According to a February 2023 Associated Press poll, 48% of Americans favor sending weapons, down from 60% who favored the move in a May poll of last year. Congressional support for Ukraine is still strong, but there is growing disagreement about how much aid to send and for how long.
What's the plan? To suggest that it's just open-ended, a blank check in Ukraine. Now remember, when we ship armament to Ukraine, we don't control where that armament's going because we've given them a blank check. I don't like blank checks.
Ukraine has made moves to address concerns about internal corruption, and U.S. lawmakers say they're satisfied with the results they've seen on first-hand visits.
We're very reassured that our military assistance is going to where it should be going to, and the accountability and transparency is there.
Leading foreign policy voices in the Senate say the outcome of the war in Ukraine will have consequences for U.S. policy for decades.
What is at stake is not only the Ukrainians' freedom, which in and of itself is important, but also the proposition that you cannot by force take another country's territory. because if that can become the rule of the day, there are many despots and authoritarians who will seek to do that.
With no clear end to the conflict in sight, the U.S. Congress is expected to debate additional aid in the coming months. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
And joining me for more insight into Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the first anniversary of the war is Tatiana Vorosko, Managing Editor, VOA's Ukrainian Service. Tatiana, welcome back to Africa 54.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Tell us what has been the impact of this war for this whole year for the Ukrainian people.
Yes, it has been the year since the full-force Russian invasion. The war has been going since 2014. And as President Biden just recently said during his unannounced trip to Kyiv, Ukraine still stands, democracy still stands. Kyiv has not been captured in 3 days, 3 weeks, or even a year. But it still comes at the enormous cost. Enormous cost. We know that about 17% of Ukrainian territory is still being occupied by Russian forces. And from thousands of testimonies, reporting, investigative work, we know what happened then. Russian troops occupy Ukrainian territories. It's tortures of the local residents, lack of access to basic services, food, extrajudicial killings. People sometimes can't leave. If they leave, sometimes they shoot at the people being evacuated. Untold cruelty being unleashed on the people under occupation. Then we're talking about civilians' casualties. The latest number I saw was 7,000 from UN. It's probably much, much higher because I will take months after the war ends to calculate the losses, and we still don't have access, or Ukrainian side or international side doesn't have access to the territories under Russian occupation. Then military losses. And when we're talking about Ukrainian military, it's professional military, but it's also all those men and women who joined the army. Some of them some of them have even took like PhD degrees, so they artists, they are athletes, or have their own businesses. So Ukraine also loses lives, but it also loses a lot of talent. When we're talking about deportations, they just learned about 6,000 Ukrainian children, and this was number which just put it a number. It's probably still higher, which has been separated from their families or from the institution where they were, and in many cases there's no access. They don't have any access to their relatives. And then we come to the destruction of infrastructure, destruction of a Ukrainian economy. Mines in the fields. So the Ukrainian farmers that farm the fields, they're in danger of being shot, and they're in danger to blow up on the mines. And then we're talking about refugees. Over 18 million Ukrainians left Ukraine. Women, over 90% of them are women with children. Since then, 10 million are returned, but we still have 8 million Ukrainians living abroad, and those are separated families. Those are lives turned upside down. And this is, loss for Ukrainian economy, and then how many would return?
Tatiana, very well summarized. We hope that this chaos will come to an end, and there will be peace and a return of people who have had to flee the country where they belong, Ukraine. Thank you so much, Tatiana.
Thank you.
Tatiana Vorosko is Managing Editor for VOA's Ukrainian Service. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs at voaafrica.com. Still to come, Teff, the nutritious grain from the Horn of Africa, finds its way in the United States. Stay with us.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, at least 96 people have been killed in more than 2 weeks of clashes between security forces and clan members in the breakaway Somali region of Somaliland, according to a hospital director who spoke on Thursday. The latest fighting broke out on February 6th. Cyclone Freddy, which pummeled Madagascar Tuesday night with heavy rains and strong destructive winds, has battered the western city of Mananjari and left thousands displaced. The death toll has risen to at least 7. The Russian military has denied that it plans to test its hypersonic missiles during naval exercises with South Africa and China off the coast of South Africa this week. Earlier, the Russian state news agency TASS had reported that the Russian warship was set to fire a Zircon missile during the joint military drills. A new report in South Africa says basic literacy among young children has dropped since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. Despite government vows to improve reading, the report says more than 30% of South African children entering grade 2 do not know the alphabet, and the majority of grade 4 students struggle with basic reading comprehension. Some private schools are working hard to reverse the trend, as Jan Bonman reports from Johannesburg.
A new report by a member of South Africa's 2030 reading panel found that the number of grade 4 learners who lack good reading comprehension skills has increased to 82%, up from an already high level of 78% 7 years ago. To counter this, some private schools are spending up to 25% more time on reading and comprehension.
We've had students from both government schools, private schools, your formal Model C schools, and the constant is that when those students come into our learning environment, almost none of them are able to read, not even blend words. So we have to go back and we have to teach our second graders, our sixth graders, sometimes even eighth graders, how to blend. And so that's really complicated because eighth graders are supposed to be able to read Harry Potter fluently.
The Academy's principal for early primary grades says parent involvement is key.
If there's a need for the parent to come and get strategies from the school, they then make an appointment to come and meet with the teacher. That's the support that they get from the school.
Nick Spall is an associate professor of economics at Stellenbosch University and the author of the reading panel report. He says the South African government needs a plan, a budget, and more.
At the moment, there is no national plan for reading. There's no reading plan for the whole country, and there isn't a budget. So if you don't have a budget and you don't have a plan, you're not going to see any progress. And the big problem in South Africa is we lack the political will to actually tackle this problem.
Officials with the country's Department of Education have acknowledged shortcomings, but add school participation and completion rates have improved over the last 20 years. Officials like Stephen Taylor of the Basic Education Department note the problem is not limited to South Africa.
So we participate in something called the Southern and East African Consortium for Monitoring Education Quality. This is an international assessment of reading and of maths at the grade 6 level that's done across 14 Southern and East African countries. And that shows that South Africa is not unique in having a reading challenge. We're actually slightly above average in the region.
Education officials say more high schoolers are graduating and say that shows the country's education system is making incremental progress. Jan Borman for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Teff, an ancient grain from the Horn of Africa, has found new enthusiasts in the United States. It is being cultivated in the American West and Midwest, where growers note its appeal as a gluten-free superfood. For more on the wonder grain, I'm joined by the man behind it all, Tesfa Dra. Mr. Dra, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Explain to a lot of our viewers here, what is teff and what is its nutritional value?
Teff is a very small grain. This is teff, very, very small, packed with a lot of nutrition. So I can put 150 of teff grain in my fingernail.
And how do you use that? You make it bread? Is it porridge? What kind of how do you cook that?
Yeah, you use this. We grinded it into a flour. So for the Ethiopians and Eritreans, make it injera. Injera is a spongy bread. And then for non-Ethiopians also, they can this is the grain by itself. You can boil it, make it breakfast cereal. It is gluten-free, as you say, it's a superfood. So anything you can do with wheat, you can substitute with Teff.
So, you know, Tesfa, the most interesting part here is that when you come to the U.S., the first thing at the airport, you cannot bring anything live, any kind of grains or something like that. I'm curious, how were you able to grow Teff here in the U.S.?
Yeah, that was back in 1982. First time I brought it, because there was no, at that time, still, you know, we eat the spongy bread, but it was made from wheat or self-rising. But back in 1982, someone went back home and brought it with me, about 20 pounds. And then I planted it in Minnesota. This is where I study. I planted it, the University of Minnesota gave me small land. I planted it, seeded by hand, and harvested it by hand, and then I thresh it by hand. And now here we are, it's everywhere.
And let me ask you, I hear you want to take it back to the Horn of Africa. You want to export it now from the United States. How is it going to be received in the region where it originally came from?
They will be happy and they are very delighted. Because teff, it is expensive in Ethiopia. Not everybody can eat it. Just the middle class and wealthy people can eat it. But right now, we're not going to sell it in Ethiopian market, but the United States government give food aid assistance to Ethiopia, about $500 million. So we are going to replace it. I'm advocating why not giving it to the Ethiopian people, the food they love. So it's going to be exported to Ethiopia as a form of food aid assistance by the U.S. government.
I need to come to the farm and get some for myself. Thank you very much, Mr. Tesfa. All right. Tesfa Dra talking to us about the teff, the nutritious grain from the Horn of Africa. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.